Moving on to the last question in section B, and the biggest question there is, the 15-mark question. So let's have a shot at this. So discuss the likely problems, so we're looking for problems, for Sainsbury's and Morrison's if the suggested merger, so we're talking about a merger between them, goes ahead. Refer to figure 1, extract C, and your own knowledge. Now, for these bigger answer questions like your 10 and your 15, I don't usually try to brainstorm too much, even though I could probably think of quite a few problems with mergers, such as monopoly power, lack of competition, diseconomies of scale, but I would use the context straight away. Why? Because the 50-mark question in the context, in the extract, they try to direct you towards a point, as they want you to speak about some certain points. So just brainstorming points here would be a bit of a waste of time. I want to see in the extract what they're trying to get me to answer about, and then I'm just going to drive those points, get those points out of the extract and speak about them. So basically, the examiner wants you to speak about certain points, and they're going to be in the extract, and let's go and find them. So we're talking about extract C, so let's have a look at that. It's talking about figure 1 and extract C. We'll look at figure 1 later. Actually, we'll look at figure 1 first. So figure 1, what we look at here, so a merger, so problem between a merger between Sainsbury's and Morrison. So here we're talking about market share. Let's just identify the market share of Sainsbury's and Morrison's. That is, so, well, the main thing is that them two together, 10 plus 16, if we just round it, is 26%. How do you define a legal monopoly? A legal monopoly is a firm with more than 25% market share. So one problem is that they will become a legal monopoly now. And then, of course, like I said before, there's quite a few problems with becoming a monopoly, like exploiting consumers with higher prices. They have a lot more market power. Then it can lead to lack of competition, lack of innovation, things like that. But then now let's have a look at extract C, which you also mentioned. So proposed merger activity in the supermarket sector. Let's see if there's anything valuable here. So they've recommended a merger. They claim it would lead to, so remember, so they claim it would lead to increased economies of scale. But remember, what was the question asking for? The question was asking for problems, but that looks like it's quite a good evaluation point because the extract states it. Market power for business, such merger. Okay, so this basically talks about regulation and how it's likely to go ahead these days. So the second paragraph is about the challenges, which are basically problems. So they should actually give us something to answer the question with. So there's considerable overlap between the locations. So that can lead to like wastage, inefficiencies, like diseconomies of scale, you could even say. Then a large company would require rationalization and coordination of 100,000 employees. Yep, so like lack of efficiency, diseconomy of scale. So a new expensive IT system is likely to be required, and the underlying difficult market trends would remain in the food retailing industry. That last point is very interesting. Why? Because if we think chronologically back, what was the main theme of this context? It was talking about how basically Aldi and Lidl, the discount supermarkets, are basically taking over. They're taking market share, and the larger ones like Morrison's, Asda, Sainsbury's, they are losing market share. So here we're talking about a merger between Sainsbury's and Morrison's, but that's not going to stop the apparent fact that these two supermarkets are losing market share anyway to the new Aldi and Lidl, to the discounter stores. So I'm just going to give you a few points here you can write about. I'm not going to write the full chain of analysis out, but like I said, one point there is definitely this one. So underlying market trends. So Aldi and Lidl are still taking over, and the main thing is a merger does not solve this. A merger will not help these two firms. Yes, they will join together, but slowly, year after year, Aldi and Lidl, these discount stores, will be taking more market share. And you can develop a nice chain of analysis around that. A really good evaluation point I was thinking here is you could say, however, this depends on a firm's objectives. As with the new, because if Sainsbury's and Morrison merge, they have more market power, and with this new market power, they could pursue a different objective. Like, for example, they could pursue sales maximizing, therefore reducing their prices. So they could basically match Aldi and Lidl's prices. Therefore, in the long run, and with different business objectives, they could actually compete with Aldi and Lidl in the long run, and with different business objectives. And another great point, and this would probably be my main point for a paragraph, 27.4% market share when they merge. So this means it's a legal monopoly. And in this paragraph, I would probably talk about what is a problem with Sainsbury's and Morrison's becoming a legal monopoly. There's several problems like exploiting consumers. So of course, with that monopoly power, since they have so much of that market share, they can charge a higher price, and consumers maybe they have a degree of inelastic demand, therefore forced to buy it, and then lack of innovation. The reason they may have a lack of innovation is due to their high market share, due to their already very high profits. There's no incentive for them to reinvest, there's no incentive for them to become dynamically efficient, invest into research and development. Therefore, in the long run, this can lead to many negative effects like consumers' the quality of goods being worse. Then, of course, it did mention here where there's basically going to be problems with, if you think about it, there's Morrison's and Sainsbury's. They usually, a lot of these supermarkets are quite close. There's two supermarkets in a 1 minute walking distance is quite a big waste, isn't it? And then merging the stores together, merging the employees together, etc, etc. But if I was writing this paragraph point on them becoming a legal monopoly, a really easy evaluation here is, I could actually relate a bit more to the extract as well, is about regulation. So it talks about GCA regulation somewhere, so whatever it's called, the groceries, it's in one of these extracts, GCA, the Groceries Code Adjudicator, or any regulatory body. Basically, if my evaluation point would be, however, in evaluation, this depends on the level of GCA regulation, as if the level of regulation is high, it will mean that even after the merger, Sainsbury's and Morrison's will not be able to exploit consumers with high prices. They may be forced to reinvest into research and development. Therefore, it will stop the negative effects of them becoming a legal monopoly. Another point, of course, from the extract would be just this point regarding to the locations of stores, enlarged company, hundreds of thousands of employees. So basically, if you think about it, there's lots of Sainsbury's and Morrison's very close together, like maybe a minute walk from each other. If they merged, it would be very inefficient to keep them both open. So it would lead to massive diseconomy of scale, especially with employees having like a new work culture, etc, etc. So this would be a massive problem for the firm. So you could definitely write a paragraph on diseconomies of scale. And then, like I was saying earlier, a really easy evaluation point, if you're going to write a diseconomy of scale paragraph, would literally be the extract. So it basically talks about diseconomies of scale here, but then in the first paragraph, it talks about increased economies of scale due to more market power, etc, etc. So you could say, in fact, however, in evaluation, this depends on the degree of economies of scale, as due to, for example, purchasing economies of scale, since they have more market power, since they're buying larger quantities, they can negotiate lower prices, and with lower prices, it reduces their LRAC, and that would, of course, be an example of economies of scale. And then the last point you could also speak about, literally it just reminded me looking at the questions, which is this question we answered earlier, which is restricting the monopsony power of supermarkets. Now, we talked about monopoly power and that they're going to become a legal monopoly, but also their monopsony power. So these supermarkets already have this massive degree of monopsony power, but now with these supermarkets merging, it's just going to further expedite, it's going to further increase that monopsony power, therefore food supply is being further exploited, and that's obviously a massive problem of the merger. Then if you want to evaluate that monopsony power point, you can literally use one of the points used in the monopsony 6C, so one of the points used here, since evaluation still works. But yeah, that's loads of points I've just given you for that 15 mark question. Of course, to get 15 marks, you do not need to use all these points. Just pick 2 KA paragraphs, so 2 problems, and then 2 evaluations, and that should be enough for 15 out of 15 if you write in enough detail.